Have you ever heard the phone ringing, and instead of getting up to answer, you just sat still, quietly hoping it would stop on its own, not because you were angry, not because you were too busy, but simply because you just didn't feel like talking at that moment. And strangely, that moment of silence felt peaceful. If that's ever happened to you, please stay, because this video isn't here to push you to change. It won't tell you to socialize more or to be more open. It's simply here to remind you of one gentle truth: you're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with you. As we grow older, we change. We're no longer loud or in a rush, and slowly we stop feeling the need to show up to every gathering, every message, every call. That change may be misunderstood by others. They may think you've grown distant, that you're pulling away, but maybe what you're doing is returning to yourself. Let me share something that few people talk about. Choosing peace after a life of noise is a quiet kind of power. In today's video, I want to tell you the story of Walter Jennings, a former high school teacher from Maine. He used to be the heart of every family gathering. He used to call 10 people a week just to ask, "Want to go for a walk?" And now he lives alone. Not sad, not bitter, not depressed, just content. You might see a part of yourself in Walter's story. If you've ever felt relief in being alone, if you've ever left a message unanswered, not out of anger, but for peace, if you've ever sat quietly in a room and thought, this is my safe space, then maybe, just maybe, you're entering a new phase of life. One that's deeply personal, one that many quietly recognize as wisdom. And if this speaks to you, I invite you to leave a comment. Type 0 if you've ever let the phone ring without answering. Type 1 if you've turned down a gathering not out of anger, but to protect your peace. I'll be reading those numbers, each one like a small signal, reminding me that even in silence, we can walk this path together. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I invite you to click that subscribe button, not to get noisy notifications, but so that once a week you have a place to return to. A quiet corner where peace is valued like a precious gift. Please don't leave too soon, because at the end of this video, I'll be sharing with you a gentle truth, a quiet but powerful secret discovered by scientists at Harvard. Sometimes choosing silence intentionally can extend your life, lower your stress, and nurture a deeper existence. I won't give you a list of benefits of being alone, and I won't tell you to avoid people. But I will walk with you through this emotional journey, through 6 psychological reasons that have been studied, from self-awareness to grief, from social fatigue to a shift in how we define happiness. So now I invite you to make a cup of tea, sit down somewhere quiet, and together let's listen, not to the noise out there, but to the soft sounds within. The ones gently telling you, you are not retreating, you are blooming. There's something beautiful about aging that no one tells you, that sometimes you're not becoming more distant, you're simply becoming more of yourself. Throughout life, we grow up surrounded by the voices of others, teachers, co-workers, family, and society. We learn to listen, respond, fit, and perform. But rarely are we asked what truly brings you peace. Until one day, maybe after 60 or a little later, you begin to hear a new voice, softer, clearer, a voice from within. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand anything from you. It simply asks what truly matters to you right now. And you realize it's not about seeing more people attending more gatherings or replying to every message. It's about something simpler, deeper. Feeling safe with yourself, sitting in stillness without feeling empty, breathing slowly without feeling regret. Psychologists call this stage the emotional reprioritization phase. You don't need more, but you need what's real. You're not searching for more people, you're choosing the right ones. And that, though completely natural, is often misunderstood. Some may say he's changed, she's become more withdrawn. But in truth, it's not withdrawal, it's letting go of what no longer feels like you. In this video, I'll walk you through 6 very real, very human reasons, backed by senior psychology experts. Why does this shift happen? Why do you no longer tolerate meaningless conversations? Why time feels more precious now? Why one-sided relationships no longer have a place in your life? But instead of listing these things coldly, I want you to feel them through a story. A slow, quiet, everyday story about a man named Walter Jennings, a retired history teacher in Maine. He was once the one making the phone calls inviting friends out, the one who brought cookies to his neighbors, the one who never missed a family gathering. And then after losing his beloved wife, something inside him quietly shifted. Not into grief, but into transformation. Walter's story is not a tragedy. It's a journey of awakening, a moment when a person begins to understand. You don't have to live to please everyone. You only need to live in a way that brings peace to your own heart. And now let me take you through that journey. A journey that began with quiet mornings and tea, no rush, no clock. With the first time he let the phone ring and felt relief. With a look from a neighbor who didn't quite understand. Until one day he realized he wasn't hiding. He was returning home to himself. And please don't skip the end of this video, because I'll be sharing with you a Harvard study published in 2023 that revealed something remarkable. Older adults who intentionally maintain fewer but deeper relationships have 28% lower cortisol levels, better sleep, and on average they live 7 years longer than those constantly trying to stay socially active. A study that made even seasoned psychologists admit not everyone who withdraws is sad. Many withdraw because they've finally found a kind of peace they've waited their whole lives for. So now I invite you to sit with me on the porch of that little wooden house where Walter Jennings still sips his tea every afternoon and listen to a story that reaches into something quiet, something very human within all of us. Walter Jennings was always the first to arrive at family gatherings, not because he feared being late, but because he loved being the one to open the gate to greet each laugh, each warm handshake. He loved the red plaid tablecloths, the smell of fresh apple pie, the clinking glasses, and the familiar shout, "Cheers to Walter again." Back when he was a history teacher at Lincoln High, Walter would throw small summer parties for his former students. They called him the soul of the group. He'd make the phone calls, write handwritten invitations, keep track of who's coming, remind them not to be late. For more than 30 years, Walter never ran out of reasons to connect. Then he retired. And shortly after, his wife Elaine, his partner of over 40 years. The woman who baked for every gathering, who sat beside him counting RSVP cards, was gone. Pancreatic cancer, just 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. No warning, no time to adjust. Only an unexpected emptiness that stretched on forever. That afternoon, when the house held only a single cup of tea on the table and one empty chair on the porch, Walter felt like a retired sea captain suddenly without his compass. Everything was still there. The maple tree outside the window, the wooden floors that creaked just so, the old radio that still read the news. But it was as if a soft layer of dust had settled on everything, and no one was coming to wipe it away. One morning, Walter opened his journal, the first page after months of silence, and wrote, "I don't know when it started, but silence has a sound of its own." And he began giving names to those sounds. The dry leaves rustling by the porch, Elaine's nap. The soft clink of porcelain against wood, July memories. The old radio reading the news, me at 50. No one else could hear them, but he could. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to pretend. When he received an invitation to his high school's 40th reunion, Walter sat down and wrote a card in return. But this time, not to RSVP, he simply wrote, "Thank you for remembering me. I'm doing well, but I think I'll stay home this time, because this home, after everything, has waited for me all these years." Then he tucked the card into a drawer. Not because he changed his mind, but because he realized he no longer owed anyone an explanation. Walter Jennings had always been the first to show up at every family gathering, not because he was afraid of being late, but because he loved being the one to open the gate, to welcome each laugh, each warm hug. He loved the red plaid tablecloths, the scent of freshly baked apple pie, the clinking of glasses, and someone calling out, "Cheers to Walter again." Back when he was a history teacher at Lincoln High, Walter hosted small summer get-togethers for his former students. People called him the soul of the group. He'd call, write handwritten invites, keep lists, and send reminders. For over 30 years, Walter never ran out of reasons to connect. Then he retired. And not long after, his wife Elaine, his partner of more than 40 years. The baker at every family event, the one who sat beside him counting RSVP cards, passed away. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. No warning, no time to prepare. Only a sudden, endless emptiness. That afternoon, with one cup of tea on the table and one empty chair on the porch, Walter felt like a retired sea captain who had lost his compass. Everything was still there. The maple tree outside the window, the creaky wooden floors, the old radio broadcasting the news. But it was as if a thin layer of dust had settled on it all, and no one was coming to clean it anymore. In the first few weeks, Walter tried to keep things the same. He still went to the store, still bought groceries for two, still sent birthday cards to old friends. He even accepted an invitation to a fall picnic organized by his old group of friends. They cared. They thought he needed to stay busy to forget, and Walter, always gracious, went. But somewhere in the golden autumn woods, while everyone played music from a Bluetooth speaker, shared old stories, laughed loudly as someone slipped into a shallow stream, Walter smiled, but not. He was listening, but not to the laughter, not to the music. He was thinking about Elaine. This story this afternoon, if she were here, she would have brought her almond cake. She would have straightened his collar before they left. If she were here. That evening, Walter sat on the front steps. He took off his shoes, still damp with morning dew inside. Not out of sadness, but out of a quiet kind of exhaustion. Not the kind that comes from the body, but from deep within. From the effort it took to keep appearing okay in front of others. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the old group inviting him for morning coffee. Walter looked at the screen, then gently placed the phone back down. They'll understand if I don't answer, he thought. And when the ringing stopped, he felt at peace. From that day on, he began choosing. Not every call was answered. Not every message was replied to right away. And one day, a close friend even asked him directly, "Walter, are you okay? You've been different lately." He nodded, smiling kindly. "I just enjoy the quiet more now." But he didn't say everything. He didn't say that every social gathering felt like a performance, a moment where he had to remind himself, don't let anyone see the emptiness. He didn't say that what he truly wanted was to sit alone in the morning, pour his Earl Grey tea, listen to the woodpecker tapping gently in the distance, and reread the handwritten notes Elaine had left in the desk drawer. They weren't long letters. Some were just a single line. Don't forget to buy lemons. But he kept everyone. Each note now was a musical note, playing softly through their old wooden home. Neighbors started asking, "Why don't we see you in town anymore?" "Don't let yourself get too lonely, okay?" Even his granddaughter Emily messaged him, "Grandpa, I think you should talk to someone." Maybe a counselor. Walter thanked them all genuinely. But deep down, he knew no one truly understood. He wasn't sad. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't falling apart. He had simply stopped needing the things that used to bring him joy, and in their place he had found something slower, deeper, more whole. One morning, Walter opened his journal again, the first page after months of stillness, and wrote, "I don't know when it started, but silence has a sound of its own." And once again he named those sounds. The rustle of dry leaves by the porch, Elaine's nap. Shakakin, the porcelain cup tapping the table, July memories. The old radio murmuring the daily news me at 50. No one else could hear them, but he could, and for the first time, he no longer had to pretend. When the invitation to his 40th high school reunion arrived, Walter sat down and wrote a card. But not to say yes, he simply wrote, "Thank you for remembering me. I'm doing well, but I think I'll stay home this time, because this home, after all, has been waiting for me all these years." Walter slipped the card into a drawer. Not because he changed his mind, but because he realized he didn't need to explain anymore. Winter came earlier than usual that year. The little wooden house was tucked beneath a soft blanket of snow, and Walter began doing something no one expected. He started to draw. At the old kitchen table, next to a warm cup of tea, were the first clumsy sketches, a porch roof, a pair of shoes, one hand gently holding another. No one had taught him, but each stroke of the pencil felt like a balm. One day he drew Elaine's face, her half smile, that old hair clip she always wore. And for the first time in months he cried, not from pain, but from the realization that he could still feel. That winter, Walter began walking again, just around the garden, watching snow melt, watching sparrows peck for crumbs. One day, he helped the neighbor's little girl retrieve her kite from a tree. The next day, she came back with a scribbled note. "You're a good artist. I want to learn too." Walter smiled. He pinned her drawing to the refrigerator, and little by little he came back. Not loudly, not quickly, but each day he allowed himself to step just a little further out of the cocoon of quiet he had wrapped around himself. One spring morning, his granddaughter Emily came to visit, and she was surprised to see him sitting on the porch with a group of neighborhood kids, showing them how to paint sunshine using pale yellow crayons. It wasn't a class, just a few chairs, some coloring sets, and one gentle old man helping children find light on a page. Grandpa Emily said, tears in her eyes, "I'm so glad you're back." Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not back, sweetheart. I'm just continuing in a new way." That evening, he sat alone, just like many evenings before. But this time it was different. He smiled, not because someone arrived, but because he was at peace. At peace enough to be alone without feeling lonely. As the sun set, Walter picked up a piece of paper and wrote just one line. "I didn't choose loneliness. I chose myself." And he pinned that note to the window frame as a message to himself, and to anyone who might pass through his life, that this silence was never the end, but a new beginning, softer, kinder, and more real than ever before. There's something strange but deeply honest that happens once we cross into our 60s and 70s. A quiet but unmistakable shift in our emotional tolerance. We no longer smile politely at small talk that feels hollow. We no longer feel obligated to sit and listen as someone tells the same story about themselves again. And we no longer keep relationships just because we used to be close. That doesn't make us cold. On the contrary, it's the result of a natural cleansing of the mind. After decades of living, we've learned to recognize what's worth holding on to and what's better left behind. A study published in the journal Psychology and Aging revealed a fascinating truth. Older adults tend to practice social selectivity. They intentionally narrow their social circles, keeping only the connections that bring genuine warmth or joy. This isn't about depression. It's not about cognitive decline. It's a healthy emotional adaptation. Walter once asked himself, "Am I just becoming grumpy?" Why was it that he, once so willing to listen to a student talk for hours, now felt drained after just 10 minutes of casual chatter in a cafe? The answer came one crisp autumn morning as he sat in a little coffee shop near home. An old acquaintance known more for monologues than conversation sat beside him. They began to chat. 10 minutes passed. Walter hadn't finished a single thought. And when the man finally paused to sip his drink, Walter smiled, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and softly said, "I think I'll head out early today. I just want to spend some time with quiet things. No bitterness, no offense. Just a kindness toward himself, one he'd never allowed before. Because at a certain age, you no longer have to pretend to enjoy things that exhaust your soul. You no longer need to swallow discomfort just to keep the peace. You begin to treasure calm. The way young people once craved excitement, every declined invitation isn't a rejection of love. It's simply a quiet truth. I just want to be with myself for a while." And that shift, that beautiful change, is the gift aging gives us, the right to be honest with how we feel. In the next part, we'll explore another important reason. Why do older adults often withdraw from social interactions? And no, it's not because they're sad. It's because they're choosing something even more valuable. Not everyone realizes this. But as we grow older, the questions inside our minds begin to change. In our younger years, we wonder, who likes me? Am I interesting enough? What do people think of me? But after 60, the questions quietly shift. Does this make me feel lighter inside? Will I feel seen after this conversation, or just drained? Is this person truly listening to me? That isn't selfishness. It's a step forward in awareness. Researchers at Stanford University have discovered that as we age, we start to prioritize what they call well-being goals. We choose peace of mind, emotional stability and presence over busyness, ambition, or standing out. And that's why, for many older adults, watering the garden, baking a pie, or flipping through an old photo album brings more joy than going to a party or attending a class reunion. Because silence is no longer a sign of loneliness. It's a sign of freedom. Walter felt this one Saturday morning when his granddaughter Emily offered to take him to a community gathering for local retirees. "They've got fun activities, Grandpa," she said cheerfully. "Karaoke, chess, movie screenings. Come with me." Walter smiled gently. "You go ahead, sweetheart. I'm staying home with my white chrysanthemums and my old jazz records," and he truly felt content. Not because he disliked crowds, but because after so many years of living, he had come to understand wholeness isn't about how many people are around you, it's about whether you feel real in that moment. This shift in priorities is often misunderstood by younger people. They may think older adults are distant or not social, but the truth is, seniors are simply choosing something more meaningful. A quiet afternoon with a book by the window instead of a long conversation that leaves the heart empty. And so they begin to cut back. Choose carefully, to hold on only to the people and the moments that helps them feel like themselves. Because when peace becomes your greatest priority, even the most exciting invitation, if it threatens that inner calm, is gently turned down. No need for an excuse, no guilt, just the quiet wisdom of someone who's lived long enough to know peace is never something you trade away. In the next part, we'll explore an emotional truth often misunderstood, yet perhaps the deepest reason why many older adults begin to turn inward: loss. Many assume that withdrawal in old age is a sign of depression, but sometimes it's simply a quiet response to grief, a feeling only those who've lived through many seasons can truly understand. No one reaches old age without carrying a few quiet scars: a friend who passed away, a loved one who no longer calls in the morning, a handwritten letter that was never answered, a trip that never happened, now too late to plan, and inside a small part of their world silently shrinks with each goodbye. Walter remembers clearly the last time he went fishing with his best friend Charles. They sat in a small wooden boat, talked about nothing in particular. The wind was soft, the lake was calm. Charles placed a hand on Walter's shoulder and said, "I hope we get to do this every summer." 3 months later, Charles died of a sudden stroke. No warning, no farewell. And Walter, once the man who made weekly calls, the glue of every friend group, began to slow down, not because he stopped caring, but because each new connection felt like another rehearsal for goodbye. It's a feeling hard to put into words, when the heart no longer wants to open its door wide, not out of anger, but out of fear, that one day that open door will lead to an empty room. Most older adults won't say this aloud, but they understand the more you lose, the more space you need to heal. And sometimes silence is the only place where the heart has time to gently reorganize the scattered memories within. A U.S. study on grief and aging found that over 60% of seniors intentionally scaled back their social circles after a major loss, not because they stopped needing people, but because they needed space to find emotional balance again. Walter once tried opening his heart again to someone new. His name was Robert, a recently moved-in neighbor. They both loved classical music. Both had a passion for history books. Both drank black tea in the morning. But one morning, Robert didn't come out to the porch like he always did. Walter waited, then asked the building manager. They said he moved out, didn't tell anyone. That was it. No anger, no sorrow. Just an absence, light but deep, and Walter withdrew just a little more. To the outside world, this closing off might look like isolation, but if you listen closely, it's not withdrawal, it's healing. Because when older adults lose someone, they don't just lose a person, they lose a part of their past, a quiet corner of their soul that once belonged to that connection, and no one can replace it. So they begin to treasure what remains, and they hold on to it in silence. In the next part, we'll explore a more physical, biological reason behind social withdrawal in older adults' mental fatigue and reduced social energy. Not all retreating comes from emotion. Sometimes it's simply the body whispering the truth. When you're young, you can spend an entire afternoon at a loud wedding, talk to dozens of people, listen to booming music, and still have the energy to go out for a late dinner. But by 70, even a small gathering with 5 close family members can leave you needing the whole next day to rest. This isn't a sign of emotional weakness, it's that the brain and body have reprioritized. They're saving energy for restoration, not spending it on extended social engagement. A study from the University of California found that older adults experience changes in the prefrontal cortex. the area that regulates social behavior and emotion, making them more easily fatigued by multiple streams of interaction. To put it simply, social fatigue is real. Walter used to think he was becoming difficult because he kept turning down group dinner invites from his nephew. But then he noticed, after every effort to join in, he needed 2 full days just to feel quiet again inside. The overlapping conversations, the loud laughter, the way people talked over each other. This left him confused about who he was listening to, who he was responding to, and even why he was there. So he began to say no, not to reject anyone, but to protect himself. Likewise, many older adults prefer to schedule social time in the morning when their bodies are more alert and their minds are still clear. They choose quiet spaces, soft lighting, and environments free from overwhelming noise. Not because they're fragile, but because they understand perhaps better than ever. Every moment of stillness is a tonic for the nervous system. Science calls this emotional self-regulation through selective social withdrawal. But most older folks would simply say, I just want a little room to breathe. And in that fatigue, they don't feel lost. They're simply listening to their bodies, something they spent a lifetime ignoring to please others. And now it's time to reveal something surprising. A truth I promised at the start of this video. You remember, don't you? That I said there would be a secret revealed at the end. Here it is. Something few people talk about, and even fewer have the patience to fully appreciate. Loneliness, when chosen intentionally, can be one of the most powerful emotional therapies we have. A long-term study from the University of Chicago found that older adults who practiced healthy, conscious withdrawal did not become depressed. They experienced lower stress, more stable blood pressure, better sleep, and lived 5 to 7 years longer than those who forced themselves to maintain constant social engagement. Why? Because when you choose to slow down, to seek quiet, to spend time with yourself, you step outside the frantic rhythm of the world. You leave behind the endless comparisons, the pressure to impress, the noise of expectation and disappointment. You return to the essentials, a slow, unhurried morning, an old jazz tune that makes you smile, a letter never sent but still comforting, an afternoon listening to leaves fall without needing to explain why. That's not laziness. That's awakening. Walter Jennings, after all the doubts, losses, and quiet heartbreaks, finally found his rhythm. He no longer forced himself to call everyone, no longer showed up just to be called friendly, no longer feared the quiet moments. Instead, he called the right people at the right time, wrote handwritten letters to his granddaughter, texted the one old friend who was still around, and every morning he spent at least 10 minutes on the balcony watching the sunrise. He once said, "When I was younger, I was afraid of being forgotten, but now all I need is to remember who I am." And you know what? That is true freedom. If you feel like you're entering this phase 2, where things inside you are getting quieter, more selective, more profound, please don't worry, you're not alone. You're just stepping into a beautiful stage of growth where you live in tune with your heartbeat, your breath, and your truest emotions. And if this video touched something in you, please leave a comment with a number. Type 0 if you've ever wanted to be alone but weren't sure why. Type 1 if you understand now that choosing who stays in your life is not selfish, it's necessary. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel so we can build a quiet, sincere, and meaningful little corner together where you don't have to be loud to be heard. Because aging is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of living more truthfully than ever. And if you're choosing solitude now, know this. You're not stepping away from the world. You're stepping closer to yourself.